"You should have left my brother alone." The words barely escaped Rosa Delgado's lips as she stared at the amber liquid swirling in the crystal tumbler. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Behind the polished mahogany bar of the Golden Lion, Chicago's most notorious mob hangout, she held more than just premium whiskey. She held justice, drop by drop, mixed into the drinks of the men who'd destroyed her life. 3 months. That's how long it had been since they dumped Danny's body in the Chicago River, like he was nothing. Her little brother, 22 years old, full of dreams about opening his own mechanic shop. His only mistake, witnessing Marco Castellano's crew executing a rival family's soldier in an alley behind this very establishment. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're from. I'd love to know. Now, let's continue. Rosa had worked at the Golden Lion for 4 years, invisible to most. Just another pretty face serving drinks to men in expensive suits who spoke in hushed tones about shipments and territories. She'd learned to keep her head down, smile politely, and never ask questions. The tips were good, and in this neighborhood you didn't question where the money came from. But that was before Danny. The night they killed him, Rosa had been working a double shift. She'd texted him around midnight. He was supposed to pick her up after closing. He never showed. The next morning, 2 detectives appeared at her apartment door. They didn't have to say much. She already knew from their faces. "Your brother was in the wrong place at the wrong time," Detective Morrison had said, his voice heavy with resignation. "We know it was Castellano's crew, but we can't touch them. The witnesses disappear. The evidence vanishes. I'm sorry, Miss Delgado, but unless someone comes forward..." No one ever came forward. Not in this neighborhood. Not when Marco Castellano owned half the judges and had the other half on his payroll. Rosa went back to work 3 days after Danny's funeral. What choice did she have? The bills didn't stop because her heart was broken, but something had changed inside her. Every time she served Marco, his Macallan 18, every time she smiled at his jokes and pretended everything was normal, a piece of her humanity chipped away, replaced by something colder, harder. The idea came to her during one of Marco's birthday celebrations. She'd watched him laugh, celebrate, toast to another successful year, surrounded by his crew, the same men who'd murdered her brother. That's when she realized the police couldn't touch them, the law couldn't reach them, but she could. She saw them every night, trusted by association, invisible in her role as the loyal waitress. She started researching. Late nights, hunched over her laptop in her cramped studio apartment, learning about untraceable substances, symptoms that mimicked natural causes, dosages that wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. Rosa discovered that thallium sulfate, once used in rat poison, was odorless and tasteless. Small doses over time caused symptoms doctors often attributed to other conditions: nausea, fatigue, confusion, hair loss. Larger doses, fatal. Getting it wasn't easy. Rosa spent weeks making connections through online forums, using encrypted messaging, until she found a supplier who asked no questions. The package arrived in a plain brown box marked Industrial Chemical Sample. Inside, a small vial that looked like nothing more than sugar. Her plan was simple, but required patience. She couldn't poison all of them at once. That would be obvious. She had to be strategic, careful, methodical. Start with the underbosses, the soldiers who'd actually pulled the trigger on Danny. Work her way up. Make it look like bad luck, poor health, the stress of mob life catching up with them. Tonight was the beginning. Vinny the Hammer. Russo sat at his usual corner booth, already 3 drinks deep. He was the muscle, the enforcer, the one who'd held Danny down while someone else put a bullet in his head. Rosa knew this because she'd paid a homeless man who lived near the river $200 for information. He'd seen everything that night, hiding in the shadows, too terrified to come forward, but willing to talk to the grieving sister of the victim. Rosa approached Vinny's table with a fresh glass of whiskey, her smile practiced and professional. "On the house, Mr. Russo." Marco wanted you to have it for the job you did last week. Vinny's meaty face broke into a grin. Rosa, doll, you're too good to us. He took the glass without hesitation. Why wouldn't he? She'd been serving him for years. She watched him take the first sip, then the second. The thallium was already dissolved, invisible, undetectable. Just a few milligrams, enough to start the process, but not enough to kill him tonight. That would come later, after weeks of carefully administered doses that would slowly shut down his organs, while doctors scratched their heads, trying to diagnose him. "Everything okay, Rosa?" Sal Benedetti, one of Marco's lieutenants, called from across the room. "You look pale." "Just tired, Mr. Benedetti. Double shift." She kept her voice steady, her expression neutral. Inside, her heart pounded like a drum. The bar buzzed with the usual activity. Marco held court at his central table, surrounded by his inner circle, discussing business in low tones. Occasionally, someone would laugh too loud, or a chair would scrape against the marble floor. The pianist in the corner played soft jazz, creating a veneer of sophistication over the criminal enterprise that funded everything. Rosa moved through the crowd, refilling glasses, taking orders, playing her part. But now, she was more than just the waitress. She was the angel of death, walking among them with a smile on her face and poison in her hands. 2 weeks later, Vinny started feeling sick. He blamed it on bad seafood from a restaurant in Little Italy. Rosa heard him complaining to Marco about the stomach cramps, the fatigue that wouldn't go away. Marco laughed it off, told him to see a doctor, stop eating garbage. Vinny did see a doctor. Multiple doctors, actually. They ran tests, found nothing conclusive. His symptoms worsened. Hair started falling out. His skin took on a greyish tint. His hands trembled when he tried to light a cigarette. Within 6 weeks, he was hospitalized. Rosa visited him once, bringing flowers like a concerned colleague. Vinny barely recognized her through his confusion and pain. "Rosa, tell Marco, I didn't rat, whatever they think." "No one thinks anything, Mr. Russo. You just need to rest and get better." She squeezed his hand gently, the same hand that had held her brother down. He died 3 days later. The doctors called it organ failure, possibly from an unknown toxin or severe infection. The funeral was attended by half of Chicago's underworld. Rosa went, dressed in black, tears in her eyes. No one suspected the grieving waitress who'd always been so loyal, so trustworthy. At the wake, she served drinks. Now it was time for the next one. Tony Numbers Martelli, the crew's accountant and strategist. He'd been the one who'd arranged for the police reports to disappear, who'd paid off the witnesses, who'd made sure Danny's murder investigation went nowhere. Rosa had already started his treatment 2 weeks ago, slipping small doses into his nightly bourbon. He was starting to complain about headaches and vision problems. The game had begun, and Rosa Delgado was just getting started. She'd learned patience from 4 years of serving drinks to criminals. She'd learned invisibility from a lifetime of being overlooked. And she'd learned that sometimes the law couldn't deliver justice, but a determined woman with nothing left to lose could. Every night, she went home to her empty apartment, looked at the photo of Danny on her dresser, his wide smile, his hopeful eyes, and reminded herself why she was doing this. For him, for every other innocent person these men had destroyed. For the justice that the system couldn't provide. The Golden Lion continued its nightly operations, unaware that death was being served alongside the premium spirits. And Rosa Delgado, the quiet waitress with the sad eyes, continued her work with the precision of a surgeon and the determination of a woman who'd lost everything. Tony Martelli's fingers drummed nervously on his mahogany desk at the back office of the Golden Lion. The numbers on his laptop screen blurred together, forcing him to blink repeatedly. His vision had been deteriorating for weeks now, and the headaches were becoming unbearable. He'd blamed it on stress, on age, on spending too many hours staring at financial records and laundered money trails. "You look like hell, Numbers," Marco Castellano said, entering the office without knocking. The boss rarely visited the back rooms. He preferred the main floor where he could see and be seen. Maybe you should take a vacation, go to Florida, get some sun. Tony rubbed his temples. It's these damn headaches, boss. Doctor says it might be migraines, gave me pills, but they don't do nothing. Then see a better doctor. I can't have my accountant going blind during tax season. Marco's tone was light, but there was an edge to it. In their world, weakness was dangerous. Men who couldn't perform their duties became liabilities. Rosa appeared in the doorway with a tray. "Evening coffee, Mr. Martelli. Black, 2 sugars, just how you like it." Tony managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Rosa. You're a lifesaver." If only he knew how ironic that statement was. She'd been increasing his dosage slightly each week, watching as his symptoms progressed. The thallium was doing its work efficiently, attacking his nervous system, causing peripheral neuropathy that doctors misdiagnosed as stress-related conditions. Soon, the pain would become severe enough that even Marco's best doctors wouldn't be able to help him. Rosa set the coffee down and retreated quietly, but not before catching Marco's eye. He watched her leave, and for a moment she felt his gaze linger. Her stomach tightened. Had she been too obvious? Too attentive? "That girl's been with us how long?" Marco asked Tony. "Rosa? 4, maybe 5 years. Why?" "No reason. Just noticed she's been looking stressed lately. Dark circles under her eyes." Tony shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Everyone's stressed, boss. It's the life." Marco lit a cigar, his expression thoughtful. "Her brother died a few months back, right? Some kind of accident." Rosa's heart nearly stopped as she listened from just outside the door, pretending to clean nearby tables. They were talking about Danny. Did Marco suspect something? "Yeah, drowned in the river or something. Tragic." Tony's voice was casual, dismissive. He didn't even remember that his crew had murdered an innocent kid. To him, it was just another Tuesday. "We send flowers?" "I think so." Rosa never complained, came right back to work. "Good employee." Marco nodded slowly. "Good employees are hard to find. Make sure she gets a bonus this month, for loyalty." Rosa forced herself to continue cleaning, her hands shaking with suppressed rage. A bonus for loyalty, as if money could replace her brother's life. As if their casual cruelty could be offset by a few $100s. That night, she increased Tony's dosage again. Within another week, Tony Martelli collapsed at his desk. The paramedics rushed him to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where doctors discovered severe organ damage and neurological deterioration. They ran every test imaginable, searching for explanations. Rare autoimmune disorder, exposure to environmental toxins, genetic condition. Rosa visited him too, playing the concerned colleague. Tony was barely conscious, his body failing rapidly. The poison had done its job perhaps too well. She'd been more aggressive with him than with Vinny, letting her anger guide the dosage. "Who did this?" Tony whispered through cracked lips when she approached his bed. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were clouded with confusion and pain. Rosa leaned closer. "Did what, Mr. Martelli?" "Someone poisoned me. I know it." His words were slurred, his mind already deteriorating. "Tell Marco. Someone's targeting us." "You're not well, Mr. Martelli. You're imagining things." She adjusted his blanket with gentle hands. "The doctors will figure it out." But they wouldn't. Rosa had been too careful. The thallium would be metabolized and excreted before anyone thought to test for it. And even if they did, the amount of time that had passed would make it nearly impossible to trace back to a source. Tony died 2 days later. His funeral was even bigger than Vinny's. 2 of Marco's top men dead within 2 months of each other. Whispers started circulating through Chicago's criminal underworld. Was it a rival family making a move? An internal power struggle? Bad luck. At the Golden Lion, tension ran high. Marco increased security, brought in new soldiers, started varying his routine. He was spooked, and rightfully so. Someone was hunting his crew, but he was looking in all the wrong places. At rival families, at internal betrayals, at external threats. He never once looked at the quiet waitress who refilled his glass every night. Rosa continued her routine, but she noticed the change in atmosphere. Men talked in more hushed tones. Meetings were moved to different locations. Marco started bringing food and drinks from outside sources, paranoid about contamination. She had to adapt her strategy. Direct poisoning at the bar was becoming too risky. She needed to be smarter, more patient. The third target on her list was Detective Frank Marino, a dirty cop on Marco's payroll who'd helped cover up Danny's murder. He came to the Golden Lion every Friday night to collect his protection money and drink himself into oblivion, but Marino was cautious. He never drank what Rosa served directly. He always had Marco's personal bartender, Paolo, make his drinks. Rosa would need to find another way to reach him. The opportunity came during one of Marco's poker nights. Marino attended, sitting at the private table in the back room, where only the inner circle was allowed. Rosa wasn't permitted to serve that room. Paolo handled all drinks for those exclusive gatherings, but Paolo had a weakness. He was sleeping with Angela, one of the coat check girls, and Angela owed Rosa a favor. Rosa had covered for her when she'd stolen money from the register to pay her mother's medical bills. "I need you to do something for me," Rosa told Angela during their break, standing in the narrow alley behind the restaurant. The night air was cold, carrying the scent of garbage and cigarette smoke. Angela's eyes widened. "Rosa, I can't steal anymore. If they catch me, not stealing. I just need you to distract Paolo for 5 minutes during the next poker night, that's all." "Why?" "Better you don't know. Please, Angela, you owe me." Angela bit her lip, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. That's it. The following Friday, Angela put on her best performance. She called Paolo out of the back room with an emergency. Someone important had arrived and needed immediate attention. While Paolo rushed to the front, Rosa slipped into the private room with a fresh bottle of Marino's preferred scotch. The detective's glass sat on the poker table, half empty. Rosa's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. A few drops from her vial, barely visible, mixing with the amber liquid. Then she was gone, back to the main floor before Paolo returned. Marino finished his drink, won 2 hands of poker, and left the establishment with Marco's blood money in his pocket. He had no idea that death was already swimming through his bloodstream. The poisoning of Marino was different from the others. Rosa used a faster-acting compound, one that would mimic a heart attack rather than a slow deterioration. A dirty cop dying of organ failure would raise too many questions. But a stressed detective with a history of drinking and poor health habits having a cardiac event? That was just unfortunate timing. 3 days later, Detective Frank Marino collapsed in his precinct bathroom. By the time his colleagues found him, he was already gone. The autopsy showed severe cardiac arrest, likely brought on by years of poor lifestyle choices and stress. No one suspected foul play. At his funeral, Rosa stood in the back, watching from a distance, 3 down. But she wasn't done yet. There were still more names on her list. The driver who'd transported Danny's body, the soldier who'd actually pulled the trigger, and eventually Marco Castellano himself. But with each death, the paranoia at the Golden Lion intensified. Marco started having food tasters, switching his drinks randomly, never finishing a glass completely. He was becoming harder to reach, more cautious, more suspicious of everyone around him. Rosa realized she needed to be even more patient. Rushing now would get her caught, and if she was caught before completing her mission, Danny's death would go unavenged. She could wait. She'd learned that the best revenge wasn't fast, it was thorough. The Chicago winter bit hard that year, wrapping the Golden Lion in a blanket of snow and ice that seemed fitting for the Cold War brewing inside its walls. 4 months had passed since Tony Martelli's death, and Marco Castellano had transformed from a confident mob boss into a paranoid shadow of himself. He'd hired new security, ex-military types who swept the restaurant for bugs daily and screened everyone who entered. He'd brought in a personal chef who prepared all his meals from scratch, ingredients sourced from verified suppliers. He'd even started wearing a bulletproof vest under his custom suits. But he still couldn't figure out who was killing his crew. Rosa watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. Marco's paranoia was almost as rewarding as the deaths themselves. She'd taken 3 of his key people, and he was jumping at shadows, suspecting everyone except the one person who'd been right under his nose the entire time. The 4th target was proving more challenging. Johnny Wheels Romano, the driver who'd transported Danny's body to the river, rarely came to the Golden Lion anymore. After Marino's death, Johnny had gone underground, working only directly with Marco and avoiding public appearances. Rosa had to think creatively. She started following Johnny during her off hours, learning his routines, mapping his life. He lived in a modest apartment in Bridgeport, had a girlfriend who worked nights as a nurse, and stopped at the same corner deli every Wednesday for lunch. The deli became her entry point. Rosa struck up a friendship with Maria, the elderly woman who ran the deli. She started coming in regularly, buying sandwiches, chatting about neighborhood gossip. When Maria mentioned she was looking for part-time help, someone to cover the lunch rush on Wednesdays, Rosa volunteered immediately. "I could use the extra money," Rosa explained with her best smile. "And I love making sandwiches." Maria hired her on the spot, grateful for the help. The following Wednesday, Rosa worked the counter when Johnny Romano walked in. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? She was just another faceless worker in his world, invisible and unimportant. "The usual, Johnny," Maria called from the back. "Yeah, extra mustard today, Maria. I'm starving." Rosa prepared his sandwich with care. Turkey, provolone, lettuce, tomato, and a generous helping of mustard that concealed the small amount of arsenic trioxide she'd mixed in. Unlike thallium, arsenic worked faster and was more detectable. But Rosa was counting on Johnny's paranoia working against him. He'd been so focused on avoiding the Golden Lion that he'd let his guard down everywhere else. She handed him the sandwich wrapped in paper, and he paid without really looking at her. "Thanks, sweetheart," he said absently, already heading for the door. Rosa's hands trembled slightly as she watched him leave, 4 down after today. Johnny Romano died 6 hours later in his apartment. His girlfriend found him convulsing on the bathroom floor, foam coming from his mouth. The paramedics tried to save him, but the arsenic had already done catastrophic damage to his organs. The coroner ruled it death by poisoning, possibly from contaminated food. The health department investigated Maria's deli. They found nothing, of course. Rosa had been too careful, wearing gloves, disposing of evidence properly. But the damage was done. Maria lost business, and the deli eventually closed. Rosa felt bad about that, but not enough to stop. Collateral damage was unavoidable in war, and this was war. The death of Johnny Romano sent shockwaves through what remained of Marco's organization. 4 key members dead within 6 months. The pattern was undeniable now. Someone was systematically eliminating Marco's crew, and no amount of security seemed to stop it. Marco called an emergency meeting at the Golden Lion, bringing in his remaining soldiers and lieutenants. Rosa served drinks during the meeting, keeping her head down, her expression neutral. She listened to them theorize about rival families, about government operations, about internal betrayals. Not once did anyone suggest the possibility of the Waitress. "It's gotta be the Russos," Sal Benedetti insisted, slamming his fist on the table. "They've been trying to take our territory for years." "The Russos are old school," Marco countered, his voice tight with stress. "This is too sophisticated for them. Someone's playing chess while we're playing checkers." "What if it's not about territory?" Paolo, the bartender, suggested quietly. "What if it's personal?" Marco's eyes narrowed. "Personal how?" "Like revenge. Someone we wronged." The room fell silent. They'd wronged so many people over the years. Which ghost had come back to haunt them? Rosa refilled glasses, her heart pounding. They were getting closer to the truth, even if they didn't realize it yet. She needed to finish this soon, before someone made the connection. Only 2 targets remained. Dominic "Dom" Caruso, the soldier who'd actually pulled the trigger on Danny, and Marco Castellano himself. Dom had disappeared completely after Johnny's death, gone into hiding in some unknown location. Marco had sent him away deliberately, protecting his most valuable enforcer. That left Marco. the man who'd ordered her brother's execution, the man who'd built his empire on fear and violence, the final piece of Rosa's revenge. But Marco was the hardest target. He was never alone, never without security, never trusting anyone or anything. Getting to him would require perfect timing and extraordinary luck, or a different approach entirely. Rosa made a decision that night, lying awake in her apartment, staring at Danny's photo. She couldn't wait for the perfect opportunity with Marco. It might never come. Instead, she needed to draw him out, make him vulnerable, create the conditions for his downfall. The next day, she called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Then she made an anonymous call to the FBI's Organized Crime Division. "I have information about Marco Castellano," she said, her voice disguised through a voice modulator app on her phone. "About the murders, about everything." She didn't give them enough to build a case, just enough to make them interested, enough to add one more source of pressure to Marco's increasingly paranoid mind. She knew the FBI had been trying to build a case against him for years. Fresh tips from an anonymous source would intensify their investigation, make Marco even more unstable. The pressure campaign worked. Within days, the FBI raided the Golden Lion, executing a search warrant based on Rosa's anonymous tip. They didn't find much. Marco was too smart for that. But the raid itself was humiliating. It showed weakness. In their world, perception was everything. Marco's empire started crumbling. Associates distanced themselves. Business partners backed out of deals. The other families smelled blood in the water and began circling. What Rosa had started with poison, she was finishing with psychology. She watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. Marco was unraveling, his carefully constructed world falling apart piece by piece. And through it all, she continued working at the Golden Lion, the loyal employee, the invisible waitress who'd been there through everything. 1 month after the FBI raid, Marco made a mistake. Stressed, exhausted, and desperate to maintain some semblance of normalcy, he dismissed his security detail for one evening. He wanted to have a quiet drink at his establishment, alone, without bodyguards breathing down his neck. Rosa saw her opportunity. That night, the Golden Lion was unusually quiet. Most of the regular customers had stayed away since the FBI raid. Marco sat at his usual table, nursing a glass of whiskey, looking older than his 53 years. The weight of paranoia and loss had aged him rapidly. Rosa approached with a fresh bottle of his favorite scotch, Macallan 25, the one he reserved for special occasions or particularly stressful days. "You look like you could use this, Mr. Castellano," she said softly, setting down a clean glass. Marco looked up at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. "Rosa, right? You've been with us a long time. 4 years, sir. Loyal. That's rare these days." He gestured for her to pour. Rosa filled his glass, her hands steady despite the enormity of the moment. This was it, the final act. She'd added enough thallium to this bottle to kill a man twice Marco's size. 1 glass, and it would be over. "Have a drink with me," Marco said suddenly. "You've earned it." Rosa's breath caught. She hadn't anticipated this. "Sir, I'm working." "I'm the boss. I say you're not working right now. Sit." She had no choice but to comply. Marco poured her a glass from the same poisoned bottle. Rosa's mind raced. If she drank it, she'd poison herself. If she refused, he might become suspicious. After all this careful planning, was this how it would end? "To loyalty," Marco said, raising his glass. Rosa raised hers, her heart hammering. She brought the glass to her lips, pretending to drink while barely letting the liquid touch her mouth. Marco, meanwhile, took a long swallow. "You know what I can't figure out?" Marco set down his glass and leaned back. "All these deaths. Vinny, Tony, Marino, Johnny. What's the connection?" Rosa's pulse quickened. "I don't know, sir. They were all involved in something together. Something that happened about 6 months before Vinny got sick. I've been going through old records, trying to remember." He took another drink. "There was a kid, I think, some mechanic who saw something he shouldn't have. Rosa's grip tightened on her glass. He was remembering. After all this time, Marco was finally putting the pieces together. "They took care of it," Marco continued, his voice becoming slightly slurred. "The poison was already affecting him. But I'm wondering now, did that kid have family? Someone who might hold a grudge?" Their eyes met across the table. In that moment, Rosa saw the recognition flash across Marco's face. He knew. Finally, after months of careful execution, he understood who'd been killing his crew. "Your brother," Marco whispered, his face paling. "Danny Delgado. You've been giving you exactly what you deserved," Rosa finished calmly. "All of you." Marco tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The massive dose of thallium was shutting down his nervous system rapidly. He reached for his phone, but his fingers fumbled uselessly. "You won't make it to the door," Rosa said quietly. "And even if you did, who would you call? Your crew is dead. Your empire is crumbling. You're alone, Marco. Just like you left me when you killed my brother." "I'll kill you," Marco gasped, trying to reach for the gun he kept in his shoulder holster, but his arms wouldn't respond to his commands anymore. Rosa stood, looking down at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for months. "No, you won't. You're dying, Marco. Right here, right now, in your own restaurant. And everyone will think it's just more bad luck, more mysterious illness. They'll never know it was me." She walked to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and locked it from the inside. Then she returned to her seat and watched Marco Castellano die. It took 43 minutes. Rosa timed it. She watched as the poison ravaged his body, as his breathing became labored, as his eyes clouded with pain and confusion. She thought about Danny during those minutes, his laugh, his dreams, his senseless death. She thought about justice and revenge and whether there was any difference between the two. When Marco finally stopped breathing, Rosa calmly walked to the back office, wiped down everything she'd touched, and prepared to leave. She'd already planned her exit strategy. Tomorrow, she'd be on a bus to California, using a fake ID she'd purchased months ago. Rosa Delgado would disappear, and someone entirely new would emerge. But before she left the Golden Lion for the last time, she did one final thing. She pulled out a small piece of paper and placed it on Marco's chest. On it, she'd written a single name, Danny Delgado. Let them figure it out, she thought. Let the world know that actions have consequences, that even the powerful can be held accountable, that a grieving sister can be just as dangerous as any rival family. Rosa walked out into the cold Chicago night, leaving behind the bodies, the blood money, and the life she'd known. She'd become something she never thought she could be, a killer, a hunter, an angel of vengeance. But she'd also become something else, free. The weight she'd carried since Danny's death had finally lifted. Justice, or something like it, had been served. Not in a courtroom, not through proper legal channels, but through the determination of one woman who refused to let her brother's murder go unpunished. As she boarded the midnight bus to Los Angeles, Rosa looked out the window at the city lights fading behind her. Somewhere in that city, police would soon discover Marco Castellano's body. They'd investigate, search for answers, and eventually they'd find the note. Maybe they'd piece together the truth. Maybe they wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. Rosa Delgado's war was over. Danny could rest now. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, her little brother was finally at peace, knowing his big sister had fought for him when no one else would. The bus pulled onto the highway, carrying Rosa toward a new life, a new identity, and the uncertain future of a woman who'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive grief is to transform it into action. She'd paid the price for justice, her innocence, her peace of mind, her old life, but she'd paid it willingly. As dawn broke over the Indiana cornfields, Rosa closed her eyes and slept dreamlessly for the first time in 6 months. The whiskey of death had claimed its final victim, and the waitress who'd served it had vanished into the American landscape, another ghost in a country built on both dreams and nightmares.